I'm going to hit, oh, there we go. So welcome everyone from the U.S. Department of State to Educator Connect. My name is Kelsey and I will be your host for today. On behalf of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, I'm pleased to welcome you all to today's session about getting started with your Fulbright Teacher Exchange application. As I mentioned in my welcome remarks, for all attendees, your audio and video are automatically disabled for this session. If you have questions for our presenters or panelists, please submit those using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And please note that the session and Q&A will be recorded to watch back later on. The views and opinions presented today by our guests belong to the presenters and do not represent the views of the U.S. government or U.S. Department of State. So one other piece of housekeeping before we get started is that today's session will focus only on opportunities for U.S. educators. This means educators who live and work in the United States, a U.S. territory, or with the Department of Defense education activity. So if you are not a citizen of the US, if you're a teacher in another country, please visit our website for more information on opportunities that you may qualify for. You can also contact the US Embassy or Fulbright Commission in your country for more information on those opportunities. But with that, let's get started and move into our next slide. So throughout this session, you'll hear from Fulbright Teacher Exchange program staff on the application process and components of each opportunity available for U.S. teachers to participate in Fulbright exchanges. We'll also be joined by 3 alumni of the programs who will share with you their experiences and recommendations for applying. And lastly, we'll have some time for open Q&A with our alumni. So again, you're putting those questions in the chat. We'll try to respond to some of them via text, but we'll save some for the Q&A at the end as well. So to start things off, let's review the basics of Fulbright Teacher Exchanges. Next slide. Throughout this webinar, we'll discuss 3 different Fulbright programs that you may apply for as a K-12 educator. We'll go over the differences in each, but first I wanted to share the similarities, things that are common across all of these programs. We'll start with what's included. In each Fulbright Teacher Exchange, your award will include round-trip airfare to and from the host country, visa support if applicable to your destination. You'll also receive support in accommodations, meals, and incidental allowances for the duration of your program. And I'll note that this may look a little different depending on how long you're abroad. All participants will also receive accident and sickness medical coverage, which is supplemental to your regular health insurance. And as a part of your program, you'll be provided with professional development opportunities. These may take the shape of online courses, support in conducting research, seminars, or other opportunities at an international university, and so on. And lastly, as alumni of Fulbright Teacher Exchanges, you will join a network of global educators and you will be eligible to apply for alumni grants to enhance and sustain your engagement in this community. Next slide, please. So each Fulbright Teacher Exchange for US educators has a competitive selection process for applicants. The application itself varies slightly between each program. You do need to apply to a specific Fulbright program. But regardless of which program you choose, you must meet a certain set of eligibility criteria. In order to be eligible for these programs, you must be a citizen of the United States. You must reside and work in the United States, a US territory, or work at a school associated with the Department of Defense education activity. You must hold at least a bachelor's degree and have had a minimum of 3 years of experience in a full-time student-facing role in a US K-12 educational institution or school district. And you must also be currently employed in such a role. For these last 2 points about employment, I'll note that eligible educators include, for example, classroom teachers, guidance counselors, curriculum coordinators, special education coordinators, media specialists, librarians, gifted and talented coordinators, and others who spend a minimum of 50% of their contracted hours in a student-facing role. So even though we call this Fulbright Teacher Exchanges, obviously a number of different educators are eligible to apply. We invite you to visit our website to read more about these eligibility criteria and to learn more about preferred qualifications for each individual program, because there are some distinctions between those. And if you have specific questions on your individual eligibility, please email us at the address shown on the screen, contact.fulbrightteachers@irex.org. We'll be able to help advise you on any specific individual questions. Next, oh, we already got it. So I'm now going to turn things over to my colleagues to tell you a little bit more about the 3 programs that you might apply for. There's the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms program and our 2 Distinguished Awards, the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching Research program and the short-term program. So I'll turn it first to Mark.
Hi, everyone, and thank you, Kelsey. My name is Mark. I'm on the Fulbright Teacher Exchanges team, and I will start things off by telling you about the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms program, or Fulbright TGC. So this program is unique as it is a year-long professional learning opportunity with a short-term exchange component. Its aim is to build teachers' capacity to develop their students' global competence. Go to the next slide. The program begins with a cohort-based global education online course in the fall. This 10-week course combines simultaneous and self-paced coursework led by experts in the field of global education. It is a thoughtful and rigorous experience with opportunities built in for practical application and collaboration with other educators. Following the online course is a symposium, which brings together the full cohort for an in-person workshop. You build networks, collaborate further, and you develop strategies to enhance global learning. This event is held in Washington, D.C. And then in the spring or summer of your year-long Fulbright TGC program, you'll participate in a group-led international field experience for 2 to 3 weeks. This will provide you with an opportunity to experience another country's history, education system, and culture. You'll visit classrooms, interact with teachers and administrators, and teach lessons to local students. The cohort-based model of this program allows time for reflection with your colleagues before returning to the United States. And the last component of Fulbright TGC is the Global Education Guide. This capstone project serves as a resource for your local school community to build global awareness and mutual understanding. It's a tool for you to share your experience with colleagues, facilitate professional learning workshops, and engage students and community members with your Fulbright experience. So in order to apply for the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms program, you'll complete a series of essay questions related to your experience with global education, how your school community would benefit from your participation in this training program. And with that, I will turn it over to my colleague, Peter.
Great, thank you, Mark. Hello, everyone. This is Peter from the Fulbright Teacher Exchanges team, and it's going to be my pleasure to tell you about the second opportunity for you as educators, the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching Research Program, also known as Fulbright DA. In the Fulbright DA program, educators spend 3 to 6 months overseas, collaborating with colleagues and pursuing research as part of their self-directed individual inquiry projects. There are no restrictions on the range of the inquiry project themes that an applicant can propose in their application. In the past, for example, inquiry project themes have included STEM, global competence, the arts and music, pedagogical approaches, learning management, language education, social studies, mathematics, social justice, and social emotional learning, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. If selected for the Fulbright DA program, participants gather in Washington, D.C. or virtually for a professional learning orientation workshop. At this workshop, participants meet with other participants in their cohorts and program alumni to further develop strategies for the inquiry project design and implementation process while abroad. The main component of the Fulbright DA program is the international experience in a Fulbright DA host country, taking place over 3 to 6 months in either the fall or spring semester. And unlike the Fulbright TGC program, which we just learned about, participants travel independently to their host country, where they pursue research into their inquiry projects with guidance from an in-country faculty advisor at their host institution. And they also take courses at that host institution pertaining to their professional goals and the subject of their inquiry project. In addition to the support of your host institution and faculty advisor, participants also have a US-based educational consultant supporting them remotely throughout the program. As part of the application process for the Fulbright DA program, you must prepare an inquiry project proposal for a specific participating country to which you'd like to travel and carry out your inquiry project research. If you're accepted, the Fulbright Teacher Exchanges team in the US and in your host country will identify your host institution, connect you to in-country educators, provide logistical support, and help you conduct your inquiry project research. So with that, I'll pass it on to Kelsey again to talk about the Fulbright DAST program.
Thank you. So last but not least in the Fulbright Teacher Exchanges suite for US educators is the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching short-term program, also known as Fulbright DAST for short. We'd like to think of this as a sister program to the one Peter just introduced. And similar to that research program, Fulbright DAST is an individual experience. It differs, however, in that participants travel overseas for only 2 to 6 weeks, and that time is spent supporting specific projects at educational institutions. In the Fulbright DAST program, projects are identified in advance by US embassies and Fulbright commissions abroad to meet specific needs of that host country. If you're interested in this program, you'll apply directly for one of these consultancy roles. The project descriptions will be available when the applications are announced, and they will include specific information related to the expectations of the project, language requirements, if any, and the specific time frame and duration of the project. Next slide, please. Once selected for Fulbright DAST, you'll participate in an online pre-departure and skill building orientation. Upon arrival to your host country, you'll have a country-specific briefing, then start working immediately to fulfill the needs of the project. Project activities on Fulbright DAST may include developing trainings, writing curricula, supporting pre-service or in-service educators, or collaborating with university faculty to update teacher training processes. Fulbright DAST participants are essentially serving as consultants to their host institutions. It's a great opportunity to inform education policy and practice in an area of your expertise. Next slide. So the slide you see now contains a brief overview of these main components and the distinctions between these 3 Fulbright teacher exchanges for US educators. To recap, Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms is a cohort-based training and professional learning opportunity that takes place over the course of a year. It includes a graduate level online course in global education and a short-term group-led experience abroad. The application deadline for this is March 24th. And when you apply for Fulbright TGC, you're applying to the program as a whole, not to a specific country. On the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching Research program, you'll complete an individual inquiry project of your own choosing. You'll spend 3 to 6 months abroad researching and completing this inquiry project. One important note for the Fulbright DA program is that due to the extended nature of this exchange, dependents are eligible to travel with you. And the application deadline for Fulbright DA is March 7th this year. And when you apply for Fulbright DA, you will be applying for a specific country and you'll be including a proposal for your inquiry project at that time. And lastly, the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching short-term program gives an opportunity for educators to act as consultants on specific time-bound projects at an educational institution abroad. There are projects in several disciplines available, and the details of these will be released with the application, which is coming soon for 2021. And again, for this program, you would be applying for a specific country and a specific project based on those project descriptions. We invite and encourage you to visit our website to read more details about each of these programs and to see some examples of alumni work from each of them. And that should help you really determine which one is right for you. So next slide, please. At this point in our session, I am pleased to turn things over to my colleague, Maxine Lunn from the U.S. Department of State, who will moderate a panel discussion of alumni who have participated in these three programs. So Maxine, take it away.
Good evening. Thank you so much, Kelsey, Peter, and Mark for your great overview of the programs. Hello, everyone. There's a lot of us, and I've already seen some really good questions come in. My name is Maxine Lunn, and I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State, which is the funding agency for Fulbright Teacher Exchanges. IREX is our partner in this program, and we thank them for all of their hard work doing these amazing educator webinars, as well as running some really fantastic programs. I'm pleased to introduce the three program alumni who will be joining us for this panel discussion. First, we have Hayam El-Sahardi, who is a social and emotional learning consulting teacher for Seattle Public Schools in Seattle, Washington. She participated in the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms program from 2018 to 2019. Jennifer Wu Pope is a world language teacher in Dix Hills, New York, and she completed the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching Research program to Singapore in 2020. And Alan Miller is an innovation coach and technology integrationist from Vermont, who traveled to Uzbekistan with the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching short-term program in 2019. You may also hear that referred to as DAST. Each of our panelists will share a short presentation about their Fulbright Teacher Exchange experiences and how it influenced their approach to their classrooms, schools, and their relationships in their communities. Throughout their presentations, we encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A box on your screens. We've already seen many come in. We'll have time to address these at the end of the session. To start off, I will now turn it over to Hayam.
Thank you, Maxine. Hi, everybody. I'm Hayam El-Sahardi, and like Maxine said, I am currently the social emotional learning consulting teacher here in Seattle, Washington. When I was in the TGC program, I was at the time a special education and math teacher at a high school for Chicago Public Schools. And while I was in Peru on my field assignment, I found about this big life transition and opportunity for me to focus on social emotional learning in Seattle. So that was quite a memory that I made on top of all of the other ones, of course, while I was there. I could go to the next slide, Mark. So as this presentation has been going on, I've been writing notes and whatnot, of course, and like most every single teacher, you just kind of change your mind on the fly. And even though I've been through the TGC program, just hearing about all of these programs simultaneously really brought out what I think and I hope might be more valuable to share right now. And I really went in and I applied for the TGC program with that desire to better my skills as someone who was very focused on social emotional learning. I was the coordinator at my old high school, one of the many hats that we all wear, as well as teaching. And so what I had noticed in my school community was that I don't want to say we were lacking a global focus, but we were moving in the right direction. And I knew that if I could have more education, more exposure, more opportunity, more experience, I could only expedite any goal we were trying to achieve, our progress on any of those goals. And going to Peru, you can see on the slide kind of the things that I took from that experience. These were the main ones, and I will speak to them because they're there. And a lot of them are really similar to some of the challenges that we have here in the US. We were really lucky in my cohort of cohorts, my small group in our host city. There was a trio of us, and we were able to see the experience and the structures of public schools, private schools, and rural schools. Very, very different. Here, what I've noticed, at least the effort in education, is that education, in theory, should be an equalizer. We know it's not. But it's what I observed and what a lot of our leaders taught us and we saw is that education in a lot of parts of the world is not, it's an effort to remove diversity. We want to homogenize our folks. And this really did not highlight a value for Indigenous peoples, cultures, traditions. These practices, these things were looked at as archaic. And as someone who is new to the country, who doesn't know much about it, you know, it was something that I kind of, you know, became wide-eyed to, a little shocking, especially at least where I am working in my city, in the groups that I surround myself with. I am really learning ways to honor our history, to embrace it, to treasure it, to celebrate it. And it was just a unique experience. I will focus on my last, I don't know how long I have to talk, couple of minutes on the social emotional learning aspect and the whole child. And it was a surprise for me that I was able to answer my governing question around social emotional learning practices in other areas of the world. We have these buzzwords, everyone, SEL, growth mindset, you know, whole child. And we have all of the words. It's all the same thing. And what was so amazing, and I remember how I discovered it too, was just one day at my school, I'm like, what are they doing? And they had a whole curriculum. And when I think of global education and I think of social emotional learning, these two areas are so naturally, they're so set to be married. And as a participant in the program, I just felt it was such a gift. I was so lucky that I got to learn all about the global competencies in the year-long course. And I got to see how they meshed with SEL, and they lend themselves to infusing in our instruction empathy. They lend to infuse into our instruction students to increase their sense of the world, their social awareness, and investigating that world, examining their own identities, examining their own assets, their cultural assets, their language assets, racial, and it was just an unexpected experience. And I remember going into the program, and I'm sure it might ring true for other folks, the other two. They said, whatever you think, you know, it's going to change. Your questions are going to change. And they did. And it was a really, really lovely process. And it ultimately might change the capstone, but that's okay too. And at the end of the day, I think the biggest thing I took is that, and it's kind of an old thing, like, you know, we have more in common than we might think. And I think we'll get to talk about the benefits of or pros and cons of cohort versus alone later. But that does stick out that the TGC is a cohort model. And it is something that I really enjoyed as a first-time Fulbrighter.
think we'll turn things over to Jennifer next.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Wu Pope. Oh, am I on? Oh, okay. I wanted to thank you all for joining us tonight. It's really an honor to be here to represent Fulbright DA. So as Maxine had mentioned, I am a teacher in Dix Hills, New York. I'm a world language teacher at the middle school level. And so my inquiry project was on developing global competence in the world language classroom for career and college readiness. And so just to give a little bit of a context about Singapore, they are a very small island nation, very diverse, with a history of having immigrants coming in from China, from Malaysia. Well, they're part of Malaysia, but part of that history is having that Malaysian connection, and then also immigrants from South India. And so it creates, oh, and also from Europe as well. So just a very, very diverse country, as you can see, diverse ethnically, in terms of language, in terms of religion. And so it's within this context that I was able to do more research on how they approach global competence instruction. And so I found out how they approached it from a holistic point of view. So actually, if we can go to the next slide, Mark. Thank you. So one of the lessons that I learned was really about how education is such a force for preparing students in participation in a diverse society, because that's essentially what Singapore does for their students. So that holistic approach includes social emotional learning, 21st century competencies, values, and character building. But within that, also a focus on global competence. And so that includes, so their interpretation includes an appreciation of diversity and also skills for perspective taking. And so while we as educators, we might see these types of educational efforts maybe come to fruition after a long period of time, or even we might not be able to see it if the students just, continue on afterwards. But being there, I actually, I got to see how it played out in schools. The students celebrating diverse cultures together. I saw how they participated in lessons and activities that related to global competence skills. And so all of these lessons really became concrete when COVID broke out while I was there. And I saw how they responded not just with safety measures, but also with social and educational actions. And so it really showed me the potential and the opportunity that we have in the US to incorporate these aspects to build tangible results for our own society. And so also the other aspect that really stood out to me while I was there was just the myriad of ways that we can incorporate global competence into instruction, because Singapore incorporates it in all subject areas, from history to nutrition class to after school activities. And so it really encouraged me too, and gave me additional ideas for how we can also incorporate this in the US context. And really it just takes, thinking outside the box, I think is maybe a summary for it. Thinking outside the box, we can also incorporate a lot of these types of approaches into our own teaching here. And so the post-program implementation, first and foremost, it really grew my skills as a teacher, my lesson design, this aspect, because as a world language teacher, it's part of my responsibility to help students become interculturally competent and globally aware. and understand other perspectives. So this experience with Fulbright DA really expanded my understanding of the role of education, but also strengthened my own ability to craft those types of lessons. And so I incorporated what I learned right away when I came back. And I think that it will continue to benefit my students in the long run. I was fortunate to complete most of my inquiry project proposal, despite my program being cut short because of the pandemic. And so leveraging my experience with Fulbright to share the lessons I learned through the research with the greater educational community, specifically with my subject area of world language. I was able to write an article and then present at a national conference, despite the situation. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity.
Thanks, Jennifer. I think we'll hear from Alan next.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Alan Miller. As you can see on the slide, I am from Vermont, buried under about 1.5 feet of snow right now, enjoying it, loving it. And my role here is I'm a tech integrationist. So those of you who are teachers can imagine, I came back from Uzbekistan, literally arrived 2 days before our school shut down and returned to a completely different job. I honestly have not been in a classroom teaching kids since last March when I returned. But just to give you a sense of my background, just because I think it's relevant as you're thinking about applying, I'm a recovering school administrator. I was a school principal for 7 years. That's what brought me to Vermont. Before that, I taught for 25 years in Alaska, and I taught Russian language and science. And so that really kind of came together for me when I saw the opportunity to go to Uzbekistan when it was posted. I've been involved internationally. I actually worked with IREX back in 1989 and taught in the previous Soviet Union. So I had some international experience and have led student exchanges back and forth to Russia for years. But DAST was really a unique situation where I've never gone in and been the expert and come in as a consultant and tried to take what I do as a coach and apply it on a much broader level. And they often say that, to really understand something, you have to teach it. I would say my greatest takeaway is I went in as a STEM expert and an expert on pedagogy, so to speak. I now understand pedagogy better than when I left because it forced me to do that kind of thinking, even though I wouldn't say I was an expert when I went in. And so if we could go to the next slide, Mark. Yeah, and so just since I'm right before questions and answers, I was thinking about this slide. Just wanted to talk in general about DAST because it is very different from the other two programs, and you are there on your own, and it's very quick. Literally, it could be as little as 2 weeks. My program was 6 weeks, so I kind of was at the maximum of it. And so these also, my sense is for a lot of them in Uzbekistan's case, it was really a start of a national initiative. The country is trying to implement STEM education. They're trying to improve their English education on a national level. And I was sent over, and here arrived the American expert, but there was no structure, format. It's like, you are going to think on your feet every day. And you can imagine if you spend 5 weeks trying to figure out what you're going to do, you're going home. And so as I think of things that really would, first of all, draw you to this program and make it enjoyable, and also set you up for success is, do you have just passion about teaching and learning and being thrown into a new context and being seen as the person who can help people solve problems? Because that's what DAST is going to be. Do you come with any special skills? And that might be specialized background, specialized training. I would say, don't be afraid of the word expert. It overwhelmed me when I arrived to be promoted as I'm here as the expert representing America. What I quickly realized is my expertise is I've been teaching for 35 years. And I understand kids and I understand what it's like to be in a classroom. And that's a commonality everywhere. And really experts, in my opinion, are those who can connect and coach. And that's what I became. I became a coach to a group of teachers, helping them because in 6 weeks, I could never understand their situation. And so what I found myself drawing on was, oh, what experiences are in my back room that might be similar that I could share, that I could then help them solve their problem. But as you're filling out the application, I wouldn't be so general as to say, you are going to be an expert with DAST. That's what you're going to be. You are going to an institute or a school or something. So what is your area of expertise? And no, that could be project-based learning, proficiency-based education. It could be SEL. It doesn't have to be this big where you would wear a label of expert in the United States. You know, the situations for a lot of these are going into very developing public education systems. And so I spent as much time talking about anticipatory sets and Madeline Hunter and grabbing kids' engagement and formative assessment as I did big dynamic STEM things. In fact, I didn't talk about those a lot because I didn't have the technology to do it. And the last one would be, I've seen a lot in the Q&A going about, you know, how can I ever get my school to support this? And I would say start with that conversation. I'll put myself as an administrator here and say, go to your administrator, the one you have a great relationship with, and say, do you think there's any way that this might be a possibility? Because the way it ended up working for me, I never envisioned at the start. I will tell you that my school allowed me to trade the time. I led a robotics club after school and did professional development for teachers, and they swapped me for 6 weeks. And so I didn't have unpaid leave. I didn't have anything like that. They hired the sub, they sent me over. And they also saw the value because we still have connections with those schools in Uzbekistan. Tomorrow morning, I'll connect with a first grade teacher over there who's doing a Perseverance robotics unit that is matching Perseverance robotics. In case you didn't know, that we've got a rover landing on Mars on February 18th, really big news. We're talking about that with Uzbekistan and first grade teachers here, and they're creating some mutual projects that I'm helping them share. And so that my principal saw as value added, because how could that happen if I didn't have a DAST opportunity? So that's kind of where I'll leave it. And I turn it back over to you, Kelsey, because it looks like we've got a ton of questions to work through.
Okay. Kelsey?
Yeah, so at this time, I think, Maxine, the floor is yours to lead us through some of the Q&A. We have a few questions that were prepared in advance. And if you'd like me to read out some of the ones from the Q&A, just let me know.
Okay. Sorry for the Zoom confusion. There are a lot of great questions, and I see that a lot of them are being answered in real time. A couple of the ones that seem to have popped up multiple times are this issue of getting permission to go. Alan, you gave a good example of how you got to go for 6 weeks through a swap. Jennifer, would you like to talk about the longer term leave and how you were able to arrange that?
Sure, I'd be happy to talk about that. So first of all, my administrator did not agree to it right away. So don't be discouraged if they say no the first time. It was on my, the first time I asked, it was, basically, this is not a good time. So I asked the second year, and that was better timing. I would also recommend going with your ideas for how to address the concerns that your administrator might have. So for me, it was regarding finding a sub that would adequately take care of the needs of our world language program while I was gone. So I would definitely, go prepared with that. And then as for, I saw some people were asking about, what about like leave with pay and things that, so that really depends on your own school. Most of the colleagues in my cohort, and me included, be prepared to not have pay during your leave. It seems to be that is the more common situation.
Okay, thank you. Hyam, you went in the summer, so that was another option to, if you really cannot get leave, if you apply for the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms, we tend to have a couple of spring experiences that sometimes overlap with spring break, but they're generally 2 to 3 weeks. Other people, we usually run more of the field experiences during the summer. However, there is the online course, which you have to do the work while you're working. But I think a lot of us are accustomed to that now. Hyam, do you have any comments about the balancing the course before you did your travel?
Yeah, I mean, the course, it's so valuable in real time. Of course, coming back, you can apply so much from your experience, but as you take the online Teachers for Global Classrooms course, there's, of course, accountability measures and sharing platforms with the entire cohort. But frankly, it was fun. And especially if you find yourself in an environment where you lack resources or you have lacked exposure to certain things in the world of technology like I did, it was a really great experience to add to my practice the next week. And a part of the course is the design of the Global Education Unit Plan. And it was a rough year, and I just was like, why am I going to wait to implement this? And I did it before I even left for my field experience. So I think also a little bit of your mindset is helpful. It doesn't take away responsibilities of planning, of life, of personal life, professional life, but seeing how much value it added to me at work, both personally and professionally, because it was fun. My kids had fun. I was like, hey guys, I don't know how this is going to go. And it was so wonderful. And I had fun, the kids had fun, and my school leaders saw it, my colleagues saw what I was doing. So like all of us are balancing new things. It's just like Maxine said, half of you, me, we've been in school while we've been teaching. People are parenting. It's just another thing. But the trade-off is really, really beneficial.
Okay, I did see a question come in about DAST and cycle 1 and cycle 2. I'd just like to comment that we are going to be reacting to this pandemic for a while now. This year's Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms, as well as our DAST programs, were postponed. We're still rescheduling some projects. So the ideal is to get back to our original model, but for those of you who are thinking about applying, we would appreciate you considering how flexible you may need to be. The best laid plans can change, and the best participants are those who are willing to go with those changes and flexibilities. Whether you thought you were going to one country and it turns out you were going to another, or the timing changes, we understand that we work with you as well in terms of people who actually have to take leave from their schools. So we and IREX try to be as flexible as possible. as well. But the pandemic ripple effects are not going to go away even after we're all vaccinated and back to hugging and shaking hands. What advice would you have for an applicant in terms of choosing the program and going through the application process? Congrats to the 150 or so folks who are here, because I would say going to the webinar and getting informed early is a good thing to do. But those of you looking back on your application process, particularly if you applied more than once, what advice would you have? Let's start with who hasn't spoken. Let's go back to Jennifer, and then Alan, and then Hannah.
Sure. So I would say leave a few months to work on the application. So this way you could always go back to it, look at it with fresh eyes, and especially have somebody else also look it over and proofread. I would say one of the most challenging parts is staying within the word limit, because you need to be clear and concise. And then also with regards to the inquiry project, for those of you that are interested in the DA program, how I would say, for me, I did go the specific route. I brainstormed a list of specific needs in my subject area first, and also topics that I was really passionate about advancing. And then I narrowed it down also to the region of the world that would be able to address the topics of research that I was interested in. And then I did research on those specific countries in that region of the world. And then from there, I was really able to hone in on a specific inquiry project.
And since DAS doesn't have an inquiry project element to it, my approach was specifically, I wanted to go somewhere that I'd never been in the world before in a system. I was very specifically drawn to Islamic culture. That was for me personally, wanting to go in, and I'm not a traveler. I'm more going in and meeting people. And I knew this is the way I would get to meet people. And I know I sold that in my application very intentionally, that recognizing that this is going to be about relationships. And I do think there is a great appreciation from Fulbright, even though DAST is 6 weeks. I think there's a desire for us to look at the long game, because honestly, I would say that what my 6-week experience has turned into is, the 12 months later, I am just as involved as I was when I was there. And so these are all developing projects. And so the question, it's hard to say where it would go, but having the open mind and saying, yeah, I'm going, this is my first step in something. I'm just not sure what it's going to be.
Thank you. What would you have to add?
Really nothing to add. Just want to echo Jennifer's guidance and piece of advice about, it's not one and done. It took me months, and I don't mean I spent months planning around my essays. I just would drop it for a while and just re-immerse myself into my practice and what I was doing. And I most definitely had other eyes on it. And even if you feel discouraged, I see a lot of people asking about, should I apply again? Should I apply again? I had someone in my cohort who had applied 3 times before, and I did not submit my application until nearing the end. And when your heart is in it, I mean, of course, it will show, not saying that that is the deciding factor, of course, but having patience with yourself through the process of writing and reflecting and planning and thinking, exercising a lot of grace, and keeping an open mind to the outcome as well.
Thanks. We just had a question come in about capstone projects, which is really relevant to TGC, but I think at the base of that question is, how did the work that you did, what you walked away with, whether it was the consulting assignment that was developed by another institution that you responded to, or an interest of yours for your research, or your capstone related to your TGC experience. Let's go back with Hayam. How did that, what impact did that have on your home institution, and on what did you bring back and I don't want to say use, but this was a new chapter. This was an opportunity to sort of reflect on who you are as an educator and maybe recommit to the profession. So what exciting thing did you really want to do when you got back? Now you changed jobs, so how did it change who you were as an educator?
Oh, yes, I did change jobs, but I mean, I always say me coming into teaching has been my career fairy tale. It just always works out. I'm so fortunate in all the roles I've ended up in. And I was able to, in my last year, before I knew I was moving across the country, I was able, like I was just saying, to implement and bring back what I was learning immediately into my classroom and school community. And immediately taking on this new role, people have been doing social emotional learning for a long time. A lot of times what we're finding is that a lot of folks don't know it, and that's where a lot of the resistance is and can still continue to build up. And my experience in TGC informs my role every day, whether I'm conscious of it or not, particularly in addressing the achievement gap between our Black students, our students of color, our Indigenous population, and being in, it's a larger city, but still it's not as diverse as I had been accustomed to in Chicago. But I have so much opportunity now because of TGC and what I learned in Peru within my cohort, with whom I still talk to all the time, not just socially, but exchanging what we're doing at work. And so my project really, I mean, it's ongoing. And I am one of 2 SEL folks in my district. And we get to lead and collaborate on these really exciting and long overdue, important SEL and equity supports. And we like to, a lot of people like to say, like me, we're not just talking the talk. We are having the bold conversations. We are citing from our experiences as educators and talking about the real impacts on our students, staff, and families here that I believe would not be going in the direction that it would be if I had not been in the program. And not saying that it would have gone on, I'm not the deciding factor here, but that experience, that learning experience really armed me with a lot of knowledge and confidence and agency, most of all, to do this work back home.
Thank you. That's great. I think that shows how it is an ongoing thing, how it's not just a travel experience. I'd like to move on just because we only have a few minutes left. There have been a lot of questions come in about how to develop that inquiry project. What advice would you have, Jennifer? And just in talking, well, I don't know how much interaction you've had with other people in your group, but what were some of the tidbits you picked up about how you go about going from the general to the specific enough to do this application?
So the research into specific countries was a big help. So with Singapore, so I can speak about Singapore because that's where I went. They actually have a lot that, if you're interested in Singapore, they have a lot on their Ministry of Education website, and so I would say after you narrow down to the topic you are interested in, really do a lot of research into the systems of education in that country. What are some specific approaches that they utilize, and you know, see how that could be useful for your own subject area. So I would start from there.
Thanks. That's really helpful. I did see a question about when will we know if travel is safe. We use a lot of. I think we'll probably have to answer that offline because I don't want to get into the details. But we're very conservative. We follow travel.state.gov. We follow the CDC recommendations. I'd like to see people vaccinated. I don't know how that's all going to work with new strains. IREX has its own consultant that they work with, and there's just a lot of discussion, and we're certainly not going to force anybody to go anywhere that they're not comfortable going. And we're in conversations with folks on the ground. We have 9 different groups that we're queuing up to go. Any last words? Awkward silence. Kelsey, we've gone over time, so.
All right, great. Well, I think we have addressed most of the questions that came in, either via text or flagging those up to our participants verbally. I do apologize. My Zoom crashed a moment ago, so I'm just catching back up myself. But I would just ask, I mean, if we can flip to the last slide we have here. Wanting to share a few additional opportunities and just reiterate how everyone can follow us to get additional updates. So our handle is Fulbright Teach on social media, specifically Facebook and Twitter. That's where you'll see all of our announcements of upcoming opportunities and any future webinars related to Fulbright Teacher Exchanges or other education topics. This also came up in some of the Q&A. We have a Facebook group for applicants to Fulbright Teacher Exchanges, and I can drop the link directly to that group in the chat. That's a great place to connect with alumni from the program and ask for other advice or to hear more about their experiences on the program directly. The other thing I'll mention here is the Teacher Suite, which is a collection of massive open online courses, or MOOCs, for K-12 educators. These are free, self-paced courses for K-12 educators across the country. They are separate from Fulbright, but a really great professional development opportunity if you're interested in learning more about global competence and global education. So there are 2 courses currently available: Global Education 101, which introduces educators to teaching for global competence. It's a really great primer if you're interested in the Fulbright TGC program in particular. And then the second course there, Teaching Online for Global Competence, equips educators with the knowledge and skills they need to engage their students in effective virtual collaboration, learning, and cross-cultural community building. So this is great if you're working in a virtual classroom or remote classroom or some sort of hybrid situation. You can gain some really great tips and tricks there with global competence in mind.
Kelsey, you want to announce the new one that's coming up?
Yes, sure. We do have a 3rd MOOC that'll be joining the suite later this spring, focused on solving real-world problems in the classroom and using problem-driven learning in your curriculum. So still under development, but we'll be excited to launch soon, and you can hear all about that as well by following us on social media at Fulbright Teach. And lastly, I'll just put a plug again for our website, FulbrightTeacherExchanges.org. This is where you'll find all the information about these wonderful exchanges and the resources I just mentioned. We have a specific tab that's just full of resources for educators, not only for Fulbrighters. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via email. We're happy to answer questions about eligibility or program dates, program specifics. anything that we didn't get to in this short hour-long session. But thank you all so much for joining. Thank you, Maxine. Thank you, Hayam, Jennifer, and Alan for sharing your experiences. I know there's a lot of interest in these programs and a lot of questions. So I thank everyone for your time this evening, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.